Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome. Today we're talking about a fanfiction called Tears of the Blue. Details about this fanfiction will be in the description below. Before that, huge warning, disclaimer before I start talking about this. If you're uncomfortable with things like rape, probably skip this one because it goes detail. Not okay. Well, yes, but so just if you're uncomfortable with things like that and like trafficking and everything, definitely skip this one. And I'll see you next time. Peter wakes up in an alleyway and he's dizzy, like blurry, like he's like falling out of consciousness, so he doesn't know what's happening. The spider senses kick in though when he hears like someone's coming closer, but they feel safe, familiar even, so falls into unconsciousness. Dick, on the other hand, was just taking out trash, and then he finds his 8-year-old in an alleyway, naked and questionable substance, completely covered. So he doesn't really know what to do in this situation. Obviously, he takes in Peter, but he calls Jason because he's panicking and has no idea what to do. Jason immediately all over it comes over. What's happening? This is where we kind of switch back and forth a little bit, but from Peter, this point of view, like he wakes up and, they try talking to him, but Peter, his voice hurts, right? So it's like, okay, definitely not talking. So then they start asking, it's like, oh, well, do you understand us? Peter goes to say yes, or like to at least nod it, but his spidey senses kick in again, and they're like yelling at him, don't say yes. He's obviously confused. He's like, first off, doesn't even question why it's talking to him, like in complete sentences, but he's already freaked out enough, but it tells him, don't say yes, even though you said earlier, you said that these people were safe. Yeah, but don't say yes yet. So it's clear he doesn't want him to say it. And while he was having this little debate, he tunes back in and he realizes that Dick had been talking in different languages to see if he could like respond to any of them. So that leaves Dick and Jason confused because he hasn't responded to any of it. So now they're kind of worried, but they try and get Peter very comfortable. And it's where obviously he realizes, oh, I'm naked. What's happening? Because again, Peter has no idea what's going on, right? He's naked. So they get him to clothes, and at this point, when he's dressed, he's looking at himself at the TV, right? His reflection is where he realizes, oh, I'm a child again. I'm 8. What's happening, right? But Dick and Jason come in and they see him, and this is where misunderstandings, the start of it, and they see him as, because they think he's been trafficked, and they think that this is the first time that he's ever really seen a TV. It's not. Again, Peter understands everything they're saying. He just can't respond. And it's not. He's just obviously surprised by his reflection. And this is where the start of a bunch of misunderstandings happen. But at the same time, as like the story slowly unravels, it's like it is a misunderstanding. But at the same time, it's like Peter's unaware that it's also not completely a misunderstanding. If that makes so, like as we go further, right? So as they're trying to like get Peter comfortable and obviously like give Peter a bath. Well, they don't really give him a bath because he's like, Dick doesn't want to make him uncomfortable anyway, so he like weirdly mimics him in a way. But they had also contacted Barbara to like see like, okay, check the cameras, people who were in the alley, like what, to find out like what happened. 3 people went in with Peter. They came back out, pulling up their pants. Like, so clearly these 3 people were the ones. So Jason's immediately pissed off. Dick calms him down, obviously, because, Peter, might not understand you, but he can clearly, all to them. Peter might not understand them, but he can clearly feel, like, sense their emotions. Like, so if they start panicking or angry, he's like, it's gonna make Peter angry. So Jason leaves for being to hunt them down, get some answers, and so that leaves Dick and Peter alone. And so Dick obviously tries to get Peter comfortable because doesn't really understand him, and or he thinks it doesn't. And so he leads him to the bed where he can sleep, and he sleeps on the couch. Of course, Peter wasn't really having that. 'Cause he's like, why don't you sleep on the bed? So they end up sleeping together on the couch. By this point, Peter had strained his voice because it hurts to, point at Dick to say, like, oh, that he's Dick. And Dick's like excited, he's like, yes, I'm Dick. And to point to himself saying that he's Peter, right? So he can only say, like, simple words. And to, Dick, this kind of further, like, oh, Peter doesn't really understand them. But he kind of points and is like, oh, I'm Peter, you're Dick. And after they kind of fall asleep, the morning comes. Jason, this is where after his little investigation, if you will, he ends up finding out it's a lot more serious, right? So it's a whole kind of organization. So they got a bunch of kids like Peter, where they essentially kind of rent them out. It's very dark, but they rent them out. And so this obviously, like, looks at Peter because it's like, it's very clear, he's 8, it's very clear he spent probably a good majority of his life, right, with these people. And so they end up getting Tim involved, texting him, how do you feel about destroying a ring? He's like, let me get my coffee, let's do this. Peter wakes up, briefly kind of freaks out because he was sleeping on top of Dick. So, that was there. But this is where, because I think obviously Peter doesn't understand, and Peter even, like, thinks it too. They don't understand, like, he doesn't understand them, that they just kind of talk about it in front of him because, well, he doesn't understand. So there's nothing really to hide. So they freely talk about, like, all the trafficking ring and everything. And Peter, not knowing who any of them are or what's kind of going on, he knows they're safe. So, but he's thinking, like, okay, so these people, some cops, like, so clearly, like, these people are clearly after some people are trafficking ring. This is where Jason obviously discovers his name is Peter, and Peter struggles to say Jason's name, so he just says Jay, because saying Jason with already, like, fucked up vocal cords is not really the greatest. So, but Jason ends up leaving to go shopping because Dick hasn't taken care of himself. He's already fully convinced Dick is absolutely going to adopt Peter. He's like, you're definitely going to adopt him, even though how much, like, he denies it. But while it's just him and Dick, Peter ends up drawing, right? And this is where he's, like, trying to memorize, like, okay, what was the last thing I remember? Well, New York, so Statue of Liberty is when he starts drawing. And, like, really good detail. And while he goes to the bathroom, this is where Dick sees the drawing, and again, misunderstandings ensue. So this is where he's like, so he's been to New York. He's like, because, like, it's too detailed for him to just be like, oh, you saw it in a picture once, or you heard it, or whatever. Because it's extremely detailed and, like, an up close, like, drawing of the Statue of Liberty. Something is, like, clearly up with Peter. He just doesn't notice it because aside, I mean, the situation in general is just weird, and he kind of spent a brief time freaking out about it, but because, he's 8 again. But aside from the fact of the, like, spider sense being just its own thing, when he was eating breakfast with Jason and Dick, he ate till he was full, and he felt, like, real full, but he didn't really notice that normally he wouldn't ever be full because of his, like, abilities and, fast metabolism. He's never really full. So he didn't notice, like, so something's clearly, like, happening, right? And so later, because Peter takes a nap, wakes back up, Tim is over, and they're going over everything. This is where they notice him. Tim introduces himself. He's very awkward about it because he doesn't really know what to do with kids. He's like, hello. But he says his name. He gets real excited about it. And this is where he sits next to Tim, like on his laptop, what he was doing, what he's looking at. He has East Lamar pulled up. But that doesn't really matter because he can't read any of it. And you realize this is like, why can't he understand anything that's going on? Like, he can't read anything on there. And that's where his body sense kind of kick in, and they're clearly trying to stop him. Like, you're not ready for it to remember something. It's like, what are we talking about? And like a brief kind of internal struggle, he passes out. Obviously, from the outside, this looks incredibly worrying because it just seemed like he passed out of nowhere. And so they're kind of like worrying, like, what the hell just happened? And then this is where, again, the other misunderstanding, they're like, well, East Lamar was, like, I had pulled that up. So maybe he just got like a flashback or he panicked. So they're like, well, so I shouldn't say they think they're on the right track. They are technically on the right track for like the whole, sting operation going on, but it doesn't I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with Peter, but it's still like kind of a misunderstanding, but they're on the right track. While Peter's passed out, he's like in some sort of like void, right? And he hears his voice of a woman. It's clearly like familiar, but he can't quite recognize it. And clearly, they're blocking the memories. They're blocking some memories of what has happened because she at least wants him to have more stability in his life because he's not even handed right now. And distantly before Peter wakes up, he hears a child's voice too. It's like full of envy and like anguish, like telling them like, or not telling them, but like saying like, why didn't they come earlier? Why didn't they help me? And I feel like at this point, like, this is definitely where you start putting pieces together that it's starting not to be a misunderstanding anymore and starting to be more Peter just kind of landed in this dimension and did all this happen? Yes, but he just doesn't know it because the memories have been blocked, right? And so he's like been, well, maybe flung into this body, which is technically his, but like maybe like I don't know, but still, it's like this clearly happened. Like all of this very clearly happened. It's just the memories are blocked, so Peter doesn't remember any of it, right? And so it's not so much a misunderstanding anymore, basically. The next time that Peter ends up waking up is when they're about to leave, right? So Jason, Tim, and Dick are about to go on this mission. And so they make sure, Dick makes sure Peter is comfortable and okay and know everything. Because I have Wally come over. So, he's kind of given the rundown. Not really, like where, Peter, like how they found him or anything, but only that he doesn't understand you and can't talk. It's just, But so then we switch to them, obviously Red Hood, Nightwing, and not Red Robin, a name I can't pronounce, and I'm not even gonna try to. I'm not gonna lie to you. I know how I pronounce it in my head and when I'm reading it, but let's be real, it's probably so different than how you say it. It's not gonna try. But the point is that he's under a different name. And then we flash back to how that came about. So he's not like Robin, and he doesn't become like Red Robin or anything, right? But it was during the time, obviously, when Bruce was gone. Unfortunate. And he, Dick was taken up, as Batman. He was going to take Robin, or Damien as Robin. And he decided to talk with Tim. He's like, I don't need you as Robin. I need you as my equal. Because, Robin has always been Batman's associate, someone to keep him stable, truly, if you will. So he's like, but I don't need you to do that for me. I need you to be my equal. I need you to, be there with me. It's like, you're independent now. And it's like, he talks about how he's seen Tim grow throughout everything, and how he's become more independent, how even like, as Robin, he started to not fight, but like kind of, um, well, I guess, yeah, sure, with Batman more, to fight with Batman more, to argue with him more on certain decisions. Like, he doesn't agree with certain moves or how like he goes about certain things where there's like a better option. So he's seen him clearly become, go down the road of becoming more independent, kind of the road how, Dick took before he became Nightwing, of just outgrowing Batman. During the mission, they end up splitting up, right? So they end up finding some files. Dick ends up fighting some kids. They get confronted because obviously bad guys are there. This is where Tim, he's in the room where like monitors, and this is where he ends up finding like a specific monitor. It's like a live feed. It's like, what? It's like, it looks eerily familiar. It's Dick's place. They've come back for Peter. So it's like, shit, been compromised. So they quickly, tell, Dick, Barbara, it's like, contact Wally, get Peter out of there immediately, right? So Wally, by like, Wally babysitting, like, he hasn't said anything, obviously. Who's he going to talk to? The kid doesn't understand him from his point of view. But it's like, the entire time he's been babysitting Peter, he's looked at Peter, like, got a real good look at him, and he's like, you're eerily similar to Dick. Like, really similar. But Wally ends up getting him out of there and going to Titan's Tower. Yay! Safest place, truly. So, and then, Starfire and like, everyone's kind of there. So they're looking at it, and it's like, why? Just immediately, she was like, why do you have a mini dick? What is happening right now? It's like, surprise. So he ends up getting them out of there. The computer, like, because it was kind of a trap, it was trapped in there. Ends up exploding. So a big explosion happens. Everyone gets cut off from each other for a bit. They're all fine. Jason ends up killing some more people. Of course he does. But Dick ends up saving the kids. And so that leaves him to go back to Titan's Tower, check on Peter, while Jason and Tim look over the files that they had gathered to see, like, the kids that were, I was supposed to say bought, but they were really stolen. But they end up, so Dick ends up going in Titan's Tower. Peter immediately recognizes him. It's like, because Dick, he's like, why is Peter, so comfortable running up to him? But he just points to him. It's like, Dick. It's like, oh, okay, well, he knows then. So no point in having the mask on or anything. But this is where they kind of look at Dick. It's like, so you want to explain? Because they did try it over the phone, kind of like, not phone, the communicator briefly. But he's like, I'm in the most, like, I don't have time for this right now, right? So they're like, does he know or something? So, but this is where they do finally end up turning. It's like, okay, so were you gonna tell us you had like a son, like, your kid? It's like, Dick, no, you're they're talking about. But then the first time he really does end up looking at Peter, and he's like, oh shit, like, you do. And then he's kind of remembering an unpleasant memory of the time he was taking advantage of, like, he was taken advantage of, and that Peter must have been born from that. So not the greatest, especially like having a kid that you didn't know for what, 8 years, and who's been through all this. Tragic. So Dick's kind of on the verge. He's fainting. At this point, Dick's having a full-blown panic attack, so they decide to take Dick to, like, the couch, get him settled, and Boy takes Peter, like, let's give him some space, right? But Peter is worried, but also some memories kind of start coming back to him, like, a little bit, right? Like, of some woman singing, like, a lullaby in a language he's never heard before, but somehow understands. And so he bit Roy to make him let go. Starts making his way back to Dick, and at this point, like kind of the memories kind of start to kind of come back to him, right? And so he doesn't understand them completely, but he does know that for whatever reason, those same eyes that Dick has, like that's his dad. He doesn't know who these people are or anything, but he knows that without a doubt, Dick is his dad. And so obviously he wants to be with him no matter what. And so this is because of, remember the whole lullaby, he just talks in the same language, which is Romani, obviously. Dick didn't try that one at first, so, but he, again, can't really speak, so it's still kind of like broken, but he, and Dick starts talking to him back in Romani, and because it's like, you speak Romani, it's like, oh my god. And so this is where, Dick is fully kind of, it's really sinking into him. He's like, I have a child. I have a child born of rape. And this is like, not only that, it kind of slowly starts to sink into like everything that's happened to Peter. It's like, what the hell happened? How did I know about this? And where, you know, that how did any of this come about? And so we go, Tim and Jason, are going over files, all of the kids' files and everything. And Peter was technically, in their care since he was, well, for a while, but he wasn't for rent until he was 3, which is horrific to even think about. But Barbara ends up notifying them that there's someone, some unfriendly going on, like in Dick's apartment. So the guy is clearly there. So Jason's taking it upon himself. He's like, he'll go get some answers at least. Doesn't really work out though, because the person ends up killing themselves. Barbara ends up running some facials. It's also a kid that disappeared, just like the others. But weirdly, like, this is a grown person, right? This person had disappeared too, like when they were a kid, and now they've reappeared as adult and they're doing this. And it's like, what is like? This whole thing is so much bigger than all of them, especially when they find out that this has been going on for like 50 plus years. This has been going on for forever, this whole organization, this spider organization. And it's like, what is even happening, right? And, the others kind of even ran like a DNA test, at Titan Tower between Dick and Peter. Before Dick completely passes out, like, this is your son. DNA completely 100% confirms that. So Dick completely passes out after that. So they end up a call between Jason and Roy, and this is where Jason finally kind of fully tells them everything, because at this point they don't know anything other than Peter has just been in their care. He doesn't understand them and he can't talk. But because they end up calling him, it's like that technically, like, he's your nephew, like, because he's Dick's son. And this, Jason was already pissed off, right? Because who does, like, to kids? But to his nephew, someone he didn't even know existed, someone he's like was taken from his like family, he's supposed to care and protect, and he failed so miserably. So it's like, it's personal now, right? So this is where he ends up telling Roy the entire thing, right? Well, not the entire thing, but he ends up telling him. It's like, Dick had found him in an alleyway. Everyone seemed like he's been trafficked. Like, my nephew had been, like, repeatedly. Like, so he does tell him. Which, then, now everyone's in the know, right? Jason's calling up Tim, tells him everything. The dude dead, whatever. And so he ends up sending Tim over. It's like, you go. I need to get some answers. So Tim, this is where it ends up coming. He's like, I need everything on Dean. Like, everything. Run some tests, right? He wants to make sure that Peter isn't like, at least because everything he's been put through, it's like, what type of disease could he have possibly, like, been given to him? And obviously, because knowing that, like, Starfire at this point is holding him too. He's holding Peter. She's holding Peter, kind of like floating. They keep, gives the space to Dick, and he's like biting her. She's not letting go. Doesn't really care. Doesn't even mind it. She doesn't feel it. And so, but because Tim's here and letting go, runs back to Dick. And so, because obviously he speaks Romani, Tim doesn't really know Romani like that, and now he kind of wishes he does, but he knows kind of broken, kind of bits and pieces here and there. But he does, so he ends up knowing enough to say that he's Dick's brother, so like that's his uncle. And so Peter, from his point of view, no idea what's going on, right? He's like, couldn't be more happy. He's like, oh, more family. Like, this is my uncle. Like, this is great. And so, could be more overjoyed, right? Dick finally wakes up. Everything hits him again because he's like, oh, shit. Okay, you're my son. This is. And like everything he's been through, not the greatest at all. They end up going over a test, and Dick can't even say it because he wants to, but he wants to know like, oh, any STs or diseases. Thankfully, no. But now they gotta face like another point. Is like, where's Dick gonna go? Where's he gonna live? Because obviously compromised, and Tim obviously kind of is leaning towards suggesting like the manor, even though Dick really doesn't want to go back to the manor. But Tim makes a point to like, where are you gonna go? You gonna bunk with one of these, like one of them? Your relationship with Starfire kind of ended horribly with Corey, so not great. And like, what, you want to like Roy? Like, you want to bring, him and his daughter into this mess? It's like, it's clear like it's not gonna work out anywhere other than the manor. But for that minute, like he's frustrated, so he doesn't want to talk about it for now. So they kind of drop it after a little bit of an argument, and Peter kind of like as he walks back to his room, he's like a bit worried. But this is where obviously speaking completely in Romani. So, but he ends up telling him like, oh, it's all completely fine. Like, just had a bit of an argument, disagreement. It's completely fine. Cut to Tim, right, talking to Bruce. This is where he just speaks matter of factly. He's like, Dick has a son, right? Like before Bruce can even get any word, and he just continues, doesn't care. Dick has a son, and he was trafficked and raped repeatedly. It's like, what for right now, like it's clearly some sort of tracker might have been put on him, but Titan Towers was clearly disabled. He needs a place to stay because he was compromised, so the safe place being the manor. But right now, what Peter, like, everything he's went through, what he needs is a stable home. And if you fight with Dick constantly, he's laying down the rules. Like, if you fight with Dick constantly, he's not going to have that. It's like, so I need you like to not fight with it, because Peter doesn't need to see that. He needs to feel safe. He needs to feel secure. He doesn't need to see his dad and his grandfather arguing. It's like he just needs a stable home. And Bruce obviously, concedes. It's like, okay, but he also clearly wants in, because like, who the hell is people and what have they been doing the entire time? Like right under his nose, trafficking kids. So Damien and Cass are kind of like, they didn't hear everything, right? But like, Damien is kind of nosy. But Tim obviously is like, it's not my place to say. Or no, ask Dick. Then we get briefly Dick going over, like telling the others how Peter came about. So the thing with Catalina and the whole awful thing. And Wally was kind of taking care of him. So he took him out of the room during that conversation. No need to see Dick like that or anything. And this is where, Dick's very thankful for that, because he really, this entire thing too is like, it's hard for Dick, because it's like, oh, first off, like, the whole thing with Catalina, that's awful to begin with. And then having his son go through kind of repeatedly too, it's like, it's, something you would never want. And he, but Dick's kind of battling, because he's doesn't like coming to terms with it and doesn't really want to think about Catalina and the whole situation with her. But and he's like trying to be strong for Peter because Peter he's supposed to be someone he can rely on. He doesn't need him, he doesn't need it to be like the other way around for you know Peter, and for Peter to feel like he's taking care of him. And this is technically where it leaves off with like ending with Tim calling and apologizing for a little argument and saying that he already set up everything, got Bruce to like not initiate any fight. So when Dick comes over, like everything will be fine. And so that's technically where it ends for now, right? 18 chapters. But you can see where I'm like, it's like a misunderstanding, but not really. It's like Peter, the theory, obviously, I'm not like, is like Peter is now in like a clearly a different dimension, obviously, but an alternate version of himself, right? So he's always existed here, and his memories are blocked because he can't really, right? Are dealing with a lot. You're 8 years old again in a different dimension. Cool, right? But in an alternate version of himself, where all this happened, technically, yes, the whole trafficking thing, everything, right? Peter has no idea about it. It happened to that version of Peter, right? But not this version of him. And so like that's where some misunderstandings come in, like the whole Statue of Liberty thing. Like, oh, he lived in New York, right? So little things like that are like misunderstandings. But overall, it's like it did happen to that Peter. It's, I guess well technically both Peters are now kind of the same, but still, it's still like it happened, but so it's not really much of a misunderstanding. Anyway, that's all the time I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!